Welcome to Natural Recovery from Suffering. This is Scott Killaby. The secret behind the secret being how to manifest this, how to manifest that, your best life, how to remove the blocks of your own suffering to live or create your best life, to have a successful career, marriage, whatever it is that you want. I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. Here's the secret behind the secret. You can't truly manifest from trauma. Put it simply like that. You can certainly do things and accomplish things, but it's coming from a sense of lack or deficiency. It's coming ultimately from emotional repression, which is holding back certain emotions and then identifying with things that are false because you're holding back what's true, and then trying to manifest or live from there, but you don't have yourself. And so obviously then you're blocked. And those blocks come up as like beliefs, identities that don't seem like beliefs and identities. They just feel like, I can't do it. I want to put up a website, but I just don't. And every day goes by and I procrastinate. Or I've been wanting to save money, but I can't. I just keep spending it. I want to wake up and know what I am and be free, but instead I just watch Netflix and listen to teachers on YouTube and get pissed at them sometimes. Whatever it is, the sabotage of your life, it's a part of our lives because it's emotional repression. It's not a mystery. Science says emotional repression drives our suffering. You could just assume until you go into your body and then verify that it's emotional repression creating the sabotage. And so if you try to manifest with trauma, you get trauma. You get transference. So in other words, whatever the blocks were from childhood, you relive them in different ways. You've seen this in your own life. So if you feel not good enough when you're 10, you feel not good enough when you're 40, when you're at the job interview. Why? It's the same buried emotions, creating the same identities from childhood. You can't be yourself, and that's why you can't manifest. If you could be your authentic self, you could just have the life that you want. That's what I have. You might look at my life and go, well, that's what you want? Like, yep, that's what I want. But it's your life that you want to be concerned with. And the holding back of yourself and your emotions that you buried and how they produce blocks in your life. And for that, we've created some great tools for that, actually. The repression inquiries target emotional repression directly so that when you're blocked in life, you utilize the blocks to reverse the repression that creates the block. Think about that. The very blocks in your life, the sabotage, you use it, once you're skillful, to reverse the very repression that creates the block, so that not only does the block go away, but the repression that is creating blocks generally starts making all the blocks go away. I mean, you're actually reversing the repression, so your suffering is going away, and blocks are part of your suffering. Self-limiting beliefs, deficiency stories, a sense of lack, something wrong with you, all that goes away because it's there because you had to believe that ever since you were a kid because you couldn't be yourself. Repression inquiry gives you your authentic self, say it that way. Because the false stuff comes from the emotions that you buried. And that I could just end the podcast there at 5 minutes and just say, go do the tools, go use the work now. And that would be a complete teaching once you get to the skills. There's not that much more context to give you. That's the secret behind the secret. Is you have to reverse the repression that creates the blocks in your life for safety and to get love and approval. It's more important to our conditioning, to our trauma, to stay safe and get love and approval than it is to fulfill whatever mission that we have at hand. So if I want to put up the website, that's fine. But if that involves in any way not staying safe and getting love, like conflict with a contractor who has the software, or I might have to get angry. So I don't do that. Or expressing myself through the website, people might come and make fun of me. And then I might not be able to be vulnerable or angry, and then I'll suffer and I'll be humiliated. See, that's all going on at an unconscious level. Sometimes we're aware of that thinking, but a lot of it is just like procrastination or self-limiting thoughts or stress. And it's not really, we don't see it, that conditioning that creates it, the blocks. So the repression inquiry allows you to see the conditioning and make it conscious so that the blocks go away. Don't trust me, trust yourself. That's what this work is all about. Okay, I'm not done, but it's not going to be an incredibly long podcast because there's just a few more things to say about sabotage and the secret. Just so that when and if you do this work, you won't fall into certain traps. That they're not bad. They're not going to kill you or anything. It's just that they'll prolong the suffering because you'll continue to see blocks if you are not aware of these traps. So stay tuned. Meditators, be careful of the trap of thinking that meditation will end self-sabotage. Look in your life and see that there's still sabotage. Even if you're a long-term meditator, there may be less, of course. But if you haven't ended self-sabotage, the reason is because when you're meditating, unless you're bringing up the conditioning from the unconscious that buries emotions, the blocks that repression produces will still arise, but not necessarily in your meditation practice. Because repression doesn't arise to awareness. The blocks that you might see in a meditation would be something like, I'm not good enough, or I can't do that. But that's just the surface level of the repression. The repression is buried emotion that doesn't arise, and neither does the conditioning that keeps it buried. So it just doesn't ever come up. And what you see are like the weeds at the surface of a garden coming up, but you can't see the roots. They're in your body and they don't arise. That's the trap of a meditation practice when it comes to this topic. Because you can cultivate a peaceful life, a very compassionate way of being, even different states and presence. But if there's sabotage, there's sabotage. If you're not living at a higher vibrational frequency, as they say, at a place where your life is really working for you energetically, you could be using a meditation practice even to avoid buried emotions. And that's a sabotage. Because you probably didn't intend to not be free through your meditation practice. That's how sabotage works. We have an intention, but then something unconscious comes to thwart that. So that it doesn't, come to fruition. And we could say, well, when I'm meditating, I don't have a goal or an objective. Well, no, I'm not saying you should. But the unconsciousness, first of all, that's an objective. Because, it is. Because if you have no intention to pull up the buried stuff, then the very practice that you're choosing is a practice of not doing that. And there's an intention behind that. It may come from ignorance, like you don't know how, or you don't know that you should, because you don't know that the root of your suffering is right there in your body and how to access it. But to say to ourselves, we're just really allowing everything when we have buried emotions, isn't really true. And that can thwart us to have that sort of attitude that we're just kind of allowing it all. Because then we won't understand why there's still sabotage if we're allowing it all. Because we're not allowing it all. We're not allowing the buried stuff, and that's responsible for the sabotage. It comes from behind the scenes to block us, to keep us safe and get us love and approval, because that's more important than whatever we're doing to the nervous system. until that's made conscious. And meditation won't do it. Similarly, mindfulness won't. So anyone who has that kind of practice, it's very calming, it's very helpful, there's lots of benefits. But look to see that there's still sabotage for the very similar reason in meditation. If you do shadow work, you might experience less sabotage, but you're still experiencing it if you didn't take the shadow work into the body to the emotional repression that creates the shadows. If you still experience deficiency stories, it means you fell into some trap because that wasn't your intention on a healing or awakening path to still believe self-limiting beliefs and block yourself. So that can point you to whatever practice you're doing, that it might not be getting to the root of the sabotage. And that's what was going on for me. I was doing a very seemingly skillful practice of self-inquiry and was experiencing great peace and freedom, but I still wasn't living and embodying the realization. There was still some sabotage. I mean, my God, when you have chronic nerve pain, that's a sabotage. I didn't intend that. And I was calling it pain as if I had no responsibility for it. But I had created that block because having chronic pain was safer than feeling and expressing anger to my loved ones. And so the anger repression created the pain. Block so that I don't have to be authentic. I can store my anger there, have chronic pain, be blocked in life in different ways, as a teacher and otherwise, in relationship. Safe. Get love. It's unconscious, it was just chronic pain. That's why you have to see every form of suffering as some sort of block. Now, some diseases, they don't come from trauma necessarily, or they might be influencing it, but there might be some genetic or other environmental or something, of course. And you can always talk about dietary changes and stuff around that, or environmental changes. But here, look into the science in your own body around how you're creating. Unconsciously, we are our suffering in many different forms. And if those aren't our blocks, then you must have never had a disease or chronic pain or depression, because it's a block to living your life, We have to survive those times. It's hard to do well or to live your best life when you're diagnosed with certain things. And the diagnosis is rather heavy too, on top of everything. Block. And also sometimes a distraction because, I thought, okay, I've been told now I have spinal stenosis. Well, that's what the chronic pain is. Well, therefore, I don't now know that that's actually my anger repression, which is responsible for any sabotage going on in my life too. See that distraction? But if you understand that we seek safety, you'll understand why we keep doing this, why we keep going away from the repression. We go away from the root of suffering and we seek safety because the repression is making us do that. And that's what our systems want, and that's the sabotage. That's why we can't live our authentic self or be our authentic self, because the repression is driving things. Until it isn't, it can be made conscious because we buried emotions for safety. And if we can have a modality that is safe enough and that is effective enough to reverse the repression, that's what we need to do it. And that's what KI is. It's those two markers especially. Because if it's not safe to do enough to keep doing, people won't do it. And they'll stay in repression. And that's a sabotage. If their intention is to do this work. So questioning self-limiting beliefs and identities. I'm not good enough and I can't. Witnessing them, inquiring into them. They might make you feel more peaceful and open. They don't get to the repression that creates the blocks. So more blocks will come. Just watch if you're in that bypass. Just feeling everything is not enough because you can't feel what's buried. It won't arise. It'll continue to create blocks and emotions that you'll have to sit and feel, but you won't get to the buried stuff that creates those blocks. So the blocks will keep happening. Get to the repression level and stay there and be skillful. That's where the blocks are being created from. Don't trust me. Verify it for yourself. Obviously, I think that's obvious, right? I mean, that's part of it. It's so important to say, because otherwise people will just sabotage themselves by saying, well, this teacher said that, so now I know it, and I can end sabotage. No, you actually have to do the work of getting to the repression that's creating it and making it conscious on a daily basis, because you're creating suffering and blocks on a daily basis. Remember, you're doing it unconsciously. That's why it's your responsibility to end the suffering and the sabotage. No one else can. It's coming from your body. It's coming from my body. That's how it works. So a big part of the sabotage and living your best life is understanding you have that at your fingertips. You have the ability to do this. You have the skills now to do it here with KI. And you have everything within you that you need to live your best life. You have all the emotions, some of which they're buried, some of them. Once you have those emotions online, you have your authentic self, then you can move through life much differently. There will still be challenges, but you can feel and express anger, vulnerability, hurt, fear. You're authentic. You're not just a drone. You're not just a peaceful person everywhere you go. You're real. Therefore, you can move through life in different ways. There's a fluidity and a dynamic way of being when you can be yourself that doesn't get stuck in the same way. There's more communication. You ask it of other people. You'll see it, because you know that holding back comes from repression and people are trying to stay safe. You're not doing it anymore when you've done the work. And so you get a lot of communication on the table that wasn't there before. And so that removes a lot of blocks in relationship. Boundaries remove a lot of blocks, because people are much clearer with each other about what they want and what they won't put up with. And that just, of course, ends a lot of sabotage, really. Because sabotage comes from unspoken, unexpressed, unfelt emotions. Abundance comes, and living your best life comes from welcoming those emotions into awareness. It's really that simple, but it's challenging work, because the system chooses sabotage. It chooses to stay safe and get love. So your job is to make that conditioning conscious. If you're ready to start, you could just get on our newsletter and look at some of the stuff we're doing and see what appeals to you. For that, you go to repressiontest.com, take our test. We'll add you straight to the newsletter. And then in the description to this podcast, I always put a link to a taste of mentorship with us, so you can just see what that's like. That's highly recommended mentorship, like 7 days of it. And then a link to, well, if the mentorship thing is not there, something will be there for mentorship, trust me, in the description. And then the do-it-yourself course or some self-paced link will be there for you for people who do not want mentorship. So check that out. Thank you for listening.